Allegations of China ensnaring developing world countries in a debt trap has become a hot topic. As China has its own issues with managing domestic debt, the idea of a China-led massive global debt default is not irrationally speculative. Yet it also deserves careful scrutiny to separate out legitimate concerns from overhyped fearmongering. Through China's far-flung Belt and Road Initiative, or BRI, which aims to recreate the ancient Silk Road through modern infrastructure projects, China's construction debt financing spans all regions of the developing, and even some parts of the developed, world. Considering just the implications for Africa, I would call out one report that recently came out giving a reasonably balanced assessment. This is a 20-minute Bloomberg video titled "The Myth of the Chinese Debt Trap in Africa." As the title implies, Bloomberg's coverage takes a relatively unorthodox perspective on the topic for a Western media organization. Key elements of Bloomberg's analysis are reviewing $340 billion worth of Chinese debt-financed infrastructure projects across 35 African countries. Bloomberg found no instances of onerous lending practices, excessive debt accumulation by African countries, or defaulted projects that were seized by China. So, a positive indicator there. Also discusses one highly controversial project, the upgrading and expansion of Entebbe International Airport, and found, despite many allegations to the contrary, no evidence of China having onerous powers such as the right to seize the project in the case of default. Another positive finding. Bloomberg concludes that China's lending practices to Africa qualify as benign and, moreover, provide Africa with desperately needed infrastructure. So in these fundamental regards, paints an overall favorable picture. In a less positive vein, the report also notes that in addition to loan repayment, borrower countries are expected to support China's geopolitical ambitions, for example, by voting with China at international bodies like the UN. This suggests that more than its desire for access to Africa's natural resources, China's grander ambition in the continent is to gain geopolitical leverage. Here's my assessment. The Bloomberg report accurately highlights that, undeniably, China is filling a gap of underinvestment in African infrastructure. Because of the importance of physical infrastructure to economic development, in a broad macroeconomic sense, this genuinely can be seen as a favorable contribution to Africa's future. Taking Bloomberg's assessment of the debt assumed by African nations at face value, the loans do not appear to be overly burdensome. In this respect as well, the so-called Chinese debt trap in Africa is indeed more myth than fact. Yet I would also say that Bloomberg glosses over the deeper issues regarding loan quality in terms of governance and transparency. There is ample evidence of non-competitive bidding and price gouging in projects that serve to enrich Chinese contractors and corrupt local officials. So this aspect of the detrimental effects of the loans and their negative impact on the soft infrastructure of institution building and rule of law should not be ignored either. The other downside that the Bloomberg report skips over is how Chinese overcapacity in its domestic labor market and infrastructure-related sectors, steel, cement, and construction, for example, is another driving force in these projects. Yes, the new infrastructure positively contributes to Africa's economic development, but it also prolongs a set of bigger, more globally impactful issues within China's economic structure. Finally, the length of these lending agreements means that it will take more time to see how burdensome the loans actually are. Hopefully, the economic activity the projects support will allow the debtor nations to repay them, but signs of repayment stress have been growing. The South China Morning Post, for example, reported that there have been increasing requests for Chinese debt relief from key African countries like Kenya, which is home to Chinese-financed projects marred by overpricing and allegations of severe corruption. Until the debts are fully paid off or retired in a way that does not indicate that debtor nations have suffered more than gained, it's still too early to make a final assessment about how just mythological or factual a Chinese debt trap for Africa actually is.